everyone. Welcome to another episode of Lit with Lenin Reloaded. Hold on. Let me just share this to Telegram, and we'll get started. So, how was your week, Janet?
It was a week. it was okay. I got a couple of things done. I was doing some reading and research and stuff, so that's how I spent my time. But
Yeah,
it was good.
I made some serious progress on my book.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
So the first chapter was the hardest because I have to explain why is it that every other book tells you something totally different than what my book will tell you. So I was explaining the origins of anti-Soviet propaganda and how they would indoctrinate children with these cartoons from American Enterprise. I forgot what the last word was. But there was this one cartoon that's something like, I can't remember the name of it now. It's an anti-communist cartoon, but there's a guy named guy who comes like a snake oil salesman who wants to sell utopiaism, and it's going to be a worker paradise. And then this other guy named John Q. Public says, "Well, America has problems, of course, but this is a good system because this system, like some random entrepreneur in his garage." Who got money from his father and his aunt?
Yeah.
Was able to start a company that employed thousands.
Yep.
The key part is he got money from his father and aunt. Most people don't have rich fathers and rich aunts who can give money to create a factory.
Exactly, and yeah, that's the and it's the one with the one selling isms.
Yeah, that's the one.
And like it's capitalism. Like capitalism has an ism in it.
Yeah, of course it does. And yeah, it was really bizarre. Like, so I talked about those kind of cartoons and how they kind of take away every kind of nuance with communism. For example, it's not the government. So when the government is a dictatorship of the proletariat and the government nationalizes a factory, it's not the government taking over the factory because they then set up local factory councils where the workers themselves decide what the work day is and set the wages. Like that's kind of what happened with the Soviet Union. Even before the October Revolution, the Petrograd Soviet set the 8-hour workday and minimum wage and so on. And then all the other factories after the revolution formed Soviets that did the same thing. They also had factory courts. So this guy once embezzled money from the factory. And so the factory workers were thinking of punishment. And eventually they decided that his wages would go directly to his wife and children. Oh, no, he embezzled money to get drunk. So they then decided that his wages would then go to directly to his wife and children. And that was that seems like a fair one thing. And that way she didn't have to give him money to get drunk.
Yeah, like she took control. No, that's a like they talk about like doing like a fair rehabilitation and retribution and stuff like that, and yeah, that seems I mean, what good is it like taking him and throwing him in jail and not having his family have income coming in? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So like you have to think of the whole situation. So yeah, no, those cartoons are so hilarious. Those anti-communism things. It's the John Sutherland, right? John Sutherland,
something like that.
Yeah, that was the director of them all.
There was a Ronald Reagan anti-communist cartoon. No, there was an starring Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, he does the narration on a big one.
Yeah.
Did you see the town though that in Wisconsin that went? I gotta send you that one because it's so funny. They did a whole documentary like we went Soviet for a day, and then they
they liked it.
Like we took the journalist away.
Oh, good.
It's so ridiculous. It's funny. I gotta send you that one.
Okay, send me that one. Yeah, so that way I can kind of explain these stories, and then I explained how the other like victims of communist narrative came from directly Nazi collaborators. But I don't understand how people in the 50s and 60s didn't figure that one out. Like, it's so obvious.
the anti-communism was just so like, I mean, and it is that like there is a little of that, like it did, like, you know, as a kid, and then you're first getting into it, and you only recognize like living in capitalism, so some of the stuff seems a little weird because you're like a dictatorship. I remember
The proletariat.
and Tina was like, dictatorship is not good. Like, and it's like, no, you don't understand. It's the workers. And I'm like,
yeah. Like, I want to explain them. Like, for example, the ALEC preemption laws. People immediately understand what a dictatorship like. So, if a town voted to have a $15 minimum wage, then ALEC can't get the state to say that town can't set the, which happened in Cleveland.
yeah.
Or the fracking laws. Like, so in a dictatorship of the proletariat, if people directly voted and said, we don't want fracking, no fracking happens in the town.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So they don't realize that they live in a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. That's the problem.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So do you remember where we left off?
Yeah, we got to start where we finished part 1.
So yeah, that was 755 pages.
Yeah, that was a long one. So we have part 2, and we're gonna head into part 3 because part 2 is pretty small.
Did we finish part 2, or did we start part 2?
Nope, we haven't started part 2 at all. We gotta go part 2 and then go from there. Do you want to? Do you want to read?
Yeah, I'll start. Let's just quickly look at if there's any YouTube comments. Hey, Kiss.
Hello, Alex.
Oops, I sent him I wanted to send him a link of the article, but I accidentally sent a link of the YouTube page that they're already visiting.
Here, I'll send it.
Okay. Let us now see how Mr. Michalowski fights. Let us now see how Mr. Michalowski fights the Social Democrats. What argument does he level against their theoretical views, against their political socialist activity? The theoretical views of the Marxists are set forth by the critic in the following manner. The truth, the Marxists are represented as declaring, that in accordance with the immanent laws of historical necessity, Russia will develop her own capitalist production with all its inherent contradictions and the swallowing up of the small capitalists by the large. Meanwhile, the mujik is like a villager, divorced from the land, will turn into a proletarian, unite, become socialized, and the trick is done. The hat reappears. Only remains to put the hat on the head of now happy mankind. And so, if you please, the Marxists do not differ in any way from the friends of the people in their conception of reality. They differ only in their idea of the future. They do not deal at all, it appears, with the present, but only with prospects. There can be no doubt that this is Mr. Michalowski's idea. The Marxists, he says, where am I?
Where are you reading from?
I don't know.
I'm not confused.
Did I skip something?
I think part 2 starts before passing to the second part. Oh, okay. So we didn't read that part.
Oh, should I have done that?
I don't know. Do we need to?
Yeah, let's do that. Sorry about this, folks. Before passing to the second part of the Mr. Michalowski's criticism, which this time is not directed against Marxist theory in general, but against the Russian Social Democrats in particular, we shall have a little digression. When criticizing Marx, Mr. Michalowski not only made no attempt to give an exact exposition of Marxist theory, but horribly distorted it. And in the same way, he now most unscrupulously garbled the ideas of the Russian Social Democrats. The truth must be restored. This can be done most conveniently by comparing the ideas of the earlier Russian socialists with the ideas of the Social Democrats. I borrow an account of the former from an article by Mr. Michalowski in Ruskaya Mysl, which means Russian Mind, in 1892. Number 6, which he also spoke of Marxism, and spoke of it, be said in reproach to him in a decent tone without dealing with problems which in a censored press can only be treated in a Burinin fashion, without confusing the Marxists with all sorts of riffraff. So yeah, the Tsar had legal press, and if you didn't have the Tsar stamps of approval, you couldn't get it printed, basically. And of course, true Marxists would never get the Tsar's print of approval, so they had an illegal press. The most interesting illegal press that I saw was in Ulyanovsk, which was Simborsk. So they had a house with a false room, and they like printed tons of newspapers there. But they had it so well hidden that it didn't get discovered until 1952.
Is this the one that didn't you see one like a?
Yeah,
Or,
this is the one I went to.
okay, that's cool.
1952. So they did a really, really good job of hiding it.
Yeah.
So yeah, they had to have these illegal presses where they printed it and then illegally distributed it in factory secretly, while teaching the workers how to read using these secret newspapers.
Yeah, it was a lot of work.
Yeah, like the workers weren't literate, so they'd actually go in and have Marxist study circles where they were like, "This is letter A, this is letter V." In Russian, it's A V B C, A V C, and then B, and then D,
and then D.
Yeah.
But yeah, being a communist is work.
Yeah, you have to literally teach people how to read.
Mm-hmm. And comprehend.
No, I think those workers comprehended very well.
No, they did. I'm just.
Yeah, I know. I'm talking about the modern people who are like, I'm on Twitter, I can read, but don't be ableist by asking me to read something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have books on, like, there are apps that can turn it into audio if reading is too hard. Like, you have our YouTube channels like us.
There's people like Asha doing reading for you. So there's plenty. You can get your reading. So yeah.
Yeah, or you can listen to it, whatever. Okay. And expounded his own views in opposition to Marxism, or at least if not in opposition, then parallel to Marxism. Of course, I have not the least desire to offend either Mr. Melowskis by classing him with among the socialists, or the Russian socialists by putting Mr. Melowskis on par with them. But I think the line of the argument is essentially the same in both cases. The difference is the ownership of the land by the tiller and the implements of labor by the producer among moral and political ideals. Well, except that's not who owns the land in Tsarist Russia back then.
Yeah.
And the implements, like the whole kulak industry came in because they didn't own the implements.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the point of departure, as you see, is most well intentioned, inspired by the best wishes. The medieval forms of labor. Okay, so by medieval forms of labor, the author explains in another place are meant not only communal land ownership, handicraft industry, and artel organization. All these are undoubtedly medieval forms, but to them must be added all forms of ownership of land or implements of production by the laborer. Huh? That doesn't even make sense. Okay. Still existing in our country has been seriously shaken. But we saw no reason to put a complete end to them for the sake of any doctrine, whatever liberal or non-liberal. I mean, if you have, like, why would you want people tilling the land if you can just have tractors go bzz, bzz, bzz? Like,
I mean, like that was like one of the questions in Alive this week, and it always happens. Well, who's gonna work the sewer system? I'm like, I actually know someone that's done that since high school. Like for 30 something years, he's worked for the sewage treatment system in Massachusetts. He presses buttons. Like that's what he does. Like people. You can automate the stuff you need to automate, especially now. Like you're not going to. Why would you put it on the people when you can automate it and just make everyone's lives easier? Like,
exactly. I saw this really cool pizza making robot from China. So like the robot just like kind of goes to town with like the dough, but it makes it into a perfect circle. And then there's a machine that comes and drops the sauce, the cheese, and the toppings. And then it glides over into an oven.
Yeah. I mean, as long as as long as the people, this is the thing in communism, you have like all your needs met, so you put in your work to get extras,
I mean,
they're all like, over 55 and over, which I'm almost there, but it's like, so it's all elderly people, living up there. And it's at the end of a cul-de-sac. No one can see it from a street. Only I can see it, and not even that well because the trees grow up in between. She keeps like a nice flower garden, keeps everything like she's toiling, she's doing work. You know what I mean? Like people naturally are not just sitting around doing nothing. They want to do stuff.
Even if they are sitting around and doing nothing, they have that right if like they're not needed for the larger goal of food production or like society.
Yeah, no, that's true too. But it's like, I mean, I think everyone thinking that the human nature is lazy. I think it's quite the opposite. I think
how humans had to hunt back in the olden days, because like back in the spear days, because we could not run faster than most animals. So, but what we could do is marathons because we have sweat glands and we can run a lot longer. So they would like basically chase a deer. The deer would like hop forward like a few hundred meters. They chase it again until it collapsed from heat exhaustion, and then they'd stick their spear in, and that's how they got their food.
Yeah.
And so they actually it's in human nature to run marathons every day to get like your pack of to get a deer or whatever. Yeah, the human nature argument is the worst. Like Michael Parenti even talks about.
I know, it's so ridiculous.
Okay. And of course, if human nature is like psychotic, lazy, whatever they imagine it to be, then you need communism. Like, do you want to give like these psychopaths power to like destroy the world?
Yeah,
like that's not an argument for capitalism if human nature is what they say it is.
No, because it taps into that. Then, like if you have a system, like that's the whole thing with capitalism. It incentivizes greed. People aren't greedy in the sense that people think, wanting stuff is greed. That's not greed. Greed is like hoarding stuff and keeping it from others and stuff like that. And under capitalism, that is incentivized.
Exactly. And then they like psychologists have looked through like the criteria for CEOs of most companies, like the job description, and they're like, yeah, they're optimizing for psychopaths here.
Yeah.
Strange argument. Obviously, forms of labor of any kind can be shaken only if they are superseded by some other forms. Yet we do not find our author, nor would we find any of his like-minded friends for that matter, even attempting to analyze and to explain these new forms. I mean, like, it was not really new forms. So instead of you being forced to work for the landlord by the decree of the czar on his land for no wages, you were given loans, and eventually, because you couldn't pay back those loans and you had no assets, you were then forced to work for the landlord on his land for no wages in order to pay. So it's the same labor, just different.
There's always a correction with them. Like, you know what I mean? Like they take away, like in America, taking away slavery, and then they corrected it. They corrected for that,
Yeah, well, the sharecropping is very similar to Russian serfdom, basically.
Yeah, and doing the prison labor. Like
the prison labor too.
They had to keep that in there, So.
Yeah, the exception to the quote-unquote 13th Amendment. Yeah. Stranger still is the second half of the trade. We saw no reason to put an end to these forms for the sake of any doctrine. What means do we, the socialists see above reservation, possess to put an end to forms of labor, that is, to reconstruct the existing production relations between members of society? Is the idea of remaking these relations in accordance with the doctrine absurd? Listen to what comes next. Our task is to rear out of our own national depths a civilization that is positively original. But it is neither is to transplant Western civilization, which one can argue about the existence and mythological nature. Because Charlie Kirk was like talking about how Islam's not compatible with Western civilization. I'm like, is there something? Because there's a Mediterranean. If you look at the Roman Empire, it went around the Mediterranean. If you look at the Greek Empire, it went around the Mediterranean. So it was like Italy, some parts of Spain, some parts of Africa, Middle East, and Greece. Byzantine Empire, it went around the Mediterranean. So anything that's called Western civilization seems to happen all around the Mediterranean.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Well, I mean, that's not amazing because that's how you get, like, you can get information and goods, and so it's like easiest to like just sail through the Mediterranean.
Yeah, it was a sarcastically amazing.
Yeah, exactly. But it's funny. Like they'll never, like when you think of Rome, you're not. Most American people are not thinking of like half of the Roman kings came from North Africa.
Yeah, and then
Like,
if you just think about like when actually they accepted Italians and Greeks, and then like Turkish people into the white race too, like
1975.
I think they had to do that just so they can prove this Western civilization.
Okay, I think it was like Italians and Greeks and Turkish people were accepted into the quote West. 1975 is what my guess.
I mean, yeah, if they were really accepted by the people because they weren't before that, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of weird that they're appropriating things that happened in this Mediterranean circle, and like it didn't happen in England. I mean, there was a brief time where the Roman Empire did end up like capturing parts of England, but that was very brief.
They just think the Enlightenment was such a great friggin' thing, not the liberal nightmare it was.
Well, I mean, even if the Enlightenment was a great thing, it happened because after the Dark Ages, guess who saved all those books? The Arab empires.
Mm-hmm.
And the Byzantine Empire, while people were burning witches, and then they went back and got those books back and retranslated them, and then yeah.
There's a bunch of comments if you want to.
Let's read. It's always okay. So hold on. Somebody says cannabinated fantasy says it's always projection from the elites. Yes, anti-communist propaganda is like the elites' like worst boogeyman of like what happens when you get those riffraff workers taking over. Alas, I have to stand in line with actual peasant.
Yes, I might actually have to be with poor people, and that's just too much.
Yeah, because so many Americans, when they repeat the breadline they don't actually read carefully what these people are saying. They're disgusted by having to stand in the same line as peasant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not that there isn't bread for like it's like, oh, before we would just like send our servants to go grocery shopping for us, and now we have to go to the store and stand in line and wait for the peasant in front of us to finish and then buy our bread.
Yeah, and the food banks in the United States are closing down right now.
Why?
Because they're not getting the donations, they're not getting the money to stay open. We don't.
Hold on. Let's do a call out in that case. So actually, let's organize a call out for next week. We will. I can figure out some food banks in the New York area, and maybe you can figure out some in the Boston area, and we can put up the addresses and what kind of food that you guys can donate if you're so inclined.
All right, I'll look into it and see where we can do some donations and stuff like that, because that would be good. People are just saying like, I can't even get food from my food bank. You're like, I mean, because I deal with a lot of like in the disabled community, and so they disabled and elderly rely on those, and they're just not getting any donations right now.
And it's shocking, for example, how many like bakeries throw out perfectly fine bread, like because it's at the night. Like they could just donate those to the food bank.
Yeah.
And grocery stores like often just throw out perfect, because the sell by date is not you can't eat it after this by date. It is you just can't sell it after this date. It has no meaning on whether the food is good or rotten or what.
I mean, like 90% of the food, it doesn't matter. I've seen them throw away gallons of cooking oil and stuff like that, like gallons and gallons and
Cooking oil
gallons.
doesn't rot. It can last up to a
Yeah,
year or so.
flour lasts as long as you don't get bugs in it. It lasts forever. Like it lasts for like a year after the sell by date. Like you can really use flour for a
I
while
have
after.
some chickpea flour I bought yesterday, so maybe I'll make some bondas with it later after. I probably won't.
Yeah.
I'll theoretically think about making bondas with it.
Yeah, but especially with how much processed food we have, or canned food and stuff like that, like that's all like preserved. So, it could last a lot longer than you think. Like a lot longer than the sell by date. But
Okay. So Daryl Davis says emancipation does not mean freedom, and the South organized itself into a separate state. It did not apply to Kentucky, Maryland, Delaware, which were political economies centered in chattel slavery. Yep, it was called the Compromise of 1857 or 58 or 59.
okay.
Also Daryl Davis says honey does not rot either, which is great. I was actually just talking to Janet about this. I have a neighbor who keeps giving me like big jars of honey. And she's like, I know you're working and single and you don't have time to make your own honey. And I'm like, what about looking at this and think that I'm the type to make my own honey?
Yeah, she's worried that Asha doesn't have time to make honey.
Yeah. I'm like, have you seen, like, do I look like that type who I barely can figure out today's meal each day?
Yeah, but honey's good though.
No, she keeps giving me honey. I don't mind. It's just that the first jar she gave me, I'm still like halfway done, and it was last year, and it's so much honey. Like, but her brother actually makes it. Like, he gets it from the bees, and then like does something with it and makes it and puts it in a bottle.
My cousin's husband retired, and now he is doing beehives because he had a friend that did, like that's what his friend did for a living, and he's like, oh, I could set up some beehives for you while you're retired. So I've been getting honey, but only like little jars at a time.
Okay. Actually, I won't make bondas tonight because yesterday I ordered Chinese food, and it's a really good soup. It's like red spicy. It has like lots of good things in it. So I'm gonna just make more rice and eat that for dinner tonight.
Yeah, get rid of that, and then you can make your bondos
in a few days. Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like for me to cook like really hardcore Indian food like samosas or puris, I need to like invite like a few neighbors over. Then I have the incentive to cook for them. Yeah, but when it's alone, it's like I'm just gonna microwave a potato.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. I have the same thing. I'm so mad because no one like eats anything I like to cook anymore because they're all like gluten free and stuff, and I'm like, ah.
Okay, Daryl says get blini. Okay, blini is Russian pancakes and whipped cream isha and finish the honey. Yes, I will. That's a great idea. There's actually a Belarusian market here not far away where they have blin that they make every morning.
Nice.
Okay. That's a great idea. Okay, what am I to go? Okay, let's continue. I forgot where. Our task is not to rear out nor our own national depths of civilization. We got distracted with the idea of Western civilization. Okay. It's positively original, but neither is to transplant Western civilization onto our own country in toto. Together with all the contradictions that are tearing it apart, we must take it what is good from wherever we can. And whether it be on our own or foreign is not a matter of principle, but a practical convenience. Surely this is so simple, clear, and understandable that there is nothing even to discuss. Absolutely. Indeed, how simple it is. Take what is good from everywhere, and the trick is done. From the medieval forms, take the laborers' ownerships of the means of production. But in the medieval times, they had serfdom, so the laborers especially did not own the means of production. Right?
Yeah, sorry, I was. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're gonna. I think they make things up too in their heads.
Okay. Okay. So they had the idealized version of the medieval times where laborers owned their own.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the medieval times is known for the serfdom everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there was issues coming out of medieval and feudalism and stuff that there was things that were good for the people, but because they had like
Medieval peasants worked less and ate better than us. And I'm having some not kosher juice. It's mango, pineapple, and it might have a small bit of alcohol. But in Russia, it does have 5%. Oh, I did not realize this first. So you've seen me. How easy is it for me to get drunk?
You will be drunk after that one drink, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So at first, I didn't realize this. Lemonade in Russia, unless you look, they have alcohol. If it like, so there's a distinction between, they have two words. So lemonade often has alcohol in it, and this is the first time I didn't know, and I was like, "Oh, it's hot out here. Let me drink." And then I was like, and now I look carefully with lemonade.
Oh, Russia.
And from the new, i.e., capitalist forms, take liberty, equality, enlightenment, and culture. In capitalism, there's these things. I did not realize that. And there's nothing to discuss. The whole subject, here, the whole subjective method in sociology, as clear as daylight. Sociology starts with the utopia, the laborer's ownership of the land, and indicates the conditions for realizing the desirable, namely, take what is good from here and from there. The philosopher takes a purely metaphysical view. Sorry. Earlier today, I was on Press TV because this is actually. Sorry, can we take one digression and you read because I'm.
Okay, I'll start reading and you do it
after the digression. This is an important digression.
Okay.
Sorry, I haven't taken my ADHD medicine.
That's okay.
Yeah, no, because on Thursday I'm gonna have to do the dreaded trip.
Estonia. I never feel. I don't know. I get nervous when you have to do your trip.
I know, because in 2023 I could just take a bus from here to go to Finland and get all my medis.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have to go to Estonia and then take a boat from Estonia to Finland.
I don't know. I get.
Yeah, and the people in Estonia are total, not cool people. Like they're kind of it's like a long line, and they harass you for no reason.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so yes, so we're gonna in that case, we're gonna have to pre-record on Wednesday so that we'll have a show for Sunday.
Okay, we can do that. I can read and discuss. Do you want?
With Iran, Iran ended up engaging in a massive espionage operation where they stole a lot of the Israeli nuclear data.
Oh, okay. Cool.
And that's pretty cool. That's pretty interesting because Israel has been targeting Iran's nuclear scientists for like decades, where they've if they step outside of Iran, they go boom, boom, they go shoot them.
Oh my God, on 60 Minutes last weekend, there's Cuban spies in America. Like the guy was working and that people were just telling him stuff. So he was telling the Cubans what people were telling him.
Yeah, and the thing about it is there's actually really good Netflix movie about this, and it's very well done. I'm surprised a capitalist country did this. It's called The West Network. But the U.S. would send all these gusanos over to commit acts of terrorism in Cuba, like blow up hotels, do other really stupid shit. And so these people pretended to be Cuban defectors and came and rounded up all the gusano terrorist networks, tricked them to go back to Cuba and got arrested. But then one of the guys got caught by the U.S. for espionage, and he got sent to jail for a few years. But yeah, it's a good story.
Yeah. I didn't. Have you ever heard of Operation Red Sox? Red
Sox?
Yeah. I just came across that a month ago, and it's the same. That's when they were picking up the the anti-communist people and throwing them back into the Soviet region after the war, right?
Yeah. And a lot of them wanted to go back because of the socialized healthcare and stuff. But the worst is what a lot of these Ukrainian exiles went back and they got to change textbooks that were like, Bandera is the hero. He didn't commit actually all this genocide that even grossed out the Nazis. And Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, like Estonia has like all these like sculptures for Nazi SS Waffen SS members. So I went to a museum in Estonia, and they kind of conveniently, like, they talked about how Estonia was trapped between Hitler and Stalin. It was like, you were not trapped between Hitler and Stalin. You were on Hitler's side. Because Estonia didn't like spontaneously turn into a Judenfrei zone on its own.
Yeah.
So yeah, they did a lot of that kind of historical erasure. In Russia, much less. Like, they couldn't do it in Russia so much. All the Soviet, or Belarus, like all the Soviet statues are up here, all of them. Ukraine, Baltics, yes. Asian countries, not so much. Like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, like they didn't do much historical erasure there either.
Yeah.
But sadly, in those countries, they somehow were able to, well, not somehow, it's because it's close and bordering Afghanistan. They were able to smuggle Al-Qaeda people over and create terrorist attacks.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't do historical erasure. They just brought new horrible terrorist attacks in those countries, sadly.
Yeah. All right.
Go ahead.
You want me to read for a little bit? Okay.
Yeah. Because I'm falling off distracted.
Okay, let me see. The philosopher takes a purely metaphysical view of social relations as of a simple mechanical aggregation of various institutions. A simple mechanical contact.
Hey, Jenna, I need to take a quick break. But can you read? Well, I'll be back in 3 minutes.
Yeah, go take a break, and I'll just keep reading.
It's a bathroom break for you guys. Want TMI?
Fine, go ahead. All right, so a simple mechanical concatenation of various phenomena. He plucks out one of these phenomena, the cultivator's ownership of the land in its medieval forms, and thinks that it can be transplanted to all other forms, just as a brick can be transferred from one building to another. But that is not studying social relations. It is manipulating the material to be studied. In reality, there was no such thing as the cultivator's ownership of the land existing separately and independently. As you have taken it, it was only one of the links in the then existing production relations, which consisted in the land being divided up among large landed proprietors, landlords who allotted it to the peasants in order to exploit them, so that the land was, as it were, wages in kind. It provided the peasant with necessary products so that he might be able to produce a surplus product for the landlord. It provided the means for the peasants to render feudal service to the landlord. Why did the author not follow up the system of production relations, instead of confining himself to plucking out one phenomenon and thus presenting it in an absolutely false light? Because the author does not know how to handle social problems. He, I repeat, I am using Mr. Melowskis' argument only as an example for criticizing Russian socialism as a whole, does not set out at all to explain the then existing forms of labor and to present them as a definite system of production relations, as a definite social formation. To use Marx's expression, the dialectical method, which requires us to regard society as a living organism in its functioning and development, is alien to him. Right. So without even asking himself why the old forms of labor are supplanted by the new, he repeats exactly the same error when he discusses these new forms. For him, it is enough to note that these forms shake the cultivator's ownership of the land. That is, speaking more generally, find expression in the separation of the producer from the means of production, and to condemn this for not conforming to the ideal. And here again, his argument is utterly absurd. He plucks out one phenomena, land dispossession, without even attempting to present it as an element of the now different system of production relations based on commodity economy, which necessarily begets competition among the commodity producers, inequality, the ruin of some of the enrichment of others. He noted one thing, the ruin of the masses, and put aside the other, the enrichment of the minority. And this made it impossible for him to understand either.
Well,
I mean,
those who have power don't care about like who controls the army doesn't care about the masses. They just want to enrich themselves.
yeah, I really like that he's like really showing how he's using Diamat here. Like how this one's not using it and then he's using it. I think this is like I don't know, it might help people understand Diamat.
Exactly. I'm having a jalapeno snack. I hope that's okay.
That's okay. In such methods he calls seeking answers to the questions of life clothed in flesh and blood. That's from the Skaya Bogus.
Ruskaya Bogatstva, Russian wealth.
When, as a matter of fact, quite the contrary is the case. Unwilling to explain reality, to look it straight in the face, he ignominiously, I don't know how to say that word.
I will look up this word to see what it means.
Fled from these questions of life with its struggle of the proprietor.
It means, okay, so it means shamefully, disgracefully.
Yeah.
And in Russian, it translates to pozorna.
Okay. That's an easier word to say than the English word.
Yeah.
With the struggle of the propertied against the propertyless, to the realm of innocent utopias. This he calls seeking answers to the questions of life, ideal treatment of their burning and complex actual reality.
Ruskaya Bogatstva, number one.
When, as a matter of fact, he did not even attempt to analyze and explain this actual reality. Can I just say that, like, I got a message from an ACP person who told me that the American Revolution was a proletarian revolution. But
have they not read the Declaration of the... Okay, so first thing, read Counter-Revolution of 1776. Check out we have 2 interviews with Jared Horn that you can check out, the one on YouTube and one on podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But now, if you read the Declaration of Independence, first they are complaining that they can't go prospecting west of the Mississippi because the British had treaties with the French and the First Nations there. They didn't want, and they were also busy colonizing Africa and Asia, and they didn't want to deal with any headaches here in the colonies. So they were like, okay, you just can't go past this. This is our treaty. You just can't. Yeah. So they were complaining about not being able to take over First Nation land more. And then the second one is the fact that they basically they're upset at not at the fact that Britain was like, so on Britain Island they banned slavery and they were slowly banning official slavery, but had different forms. Yeah. So it was clear. And if you can compare, like, there's 2 things. The Bolivarian revolution that Simone Bolivar led, that was they were not proletarians because South America was not industrialized, but that was a poor people's revolution. One easy way is, who did George Washington's slave fight on behalf of?
Yeah.
The British. They ran away and fought on fight. Who did Simone Bolivar's former slaves that had ran away came back to fight in his army. Yeah. And Simone Bolivar declared, like, in order to get alliances with some of the First Nations, in Peru he declared Indians don't pay taxes because we already took enough from them. So the Indians also fought on Simone Bolivar's side. Who did the Indians fight on in the Revolutionary War?
The British.
Exactly. So, like, those are like like, why were they fighting? Because they knew these psychos were genocidal and totally psycho. And so it's clear that there was, and also, who did poor white people fight on the behalf of?
Yeah, with the British. Like,
exactly.
Like, it's and the what you already brought up, the fact that It can't even, like, in the time frame of 1776, we weren't even considered industrialized until like almost 20 years later than that. And so it would be more agrarian anyways. You can't really call it a proletarian.
No, because England had the factories, America had the cotton. England would get the cotton from America and process it there. Then America became a little less relevant when they colonized India towards the beginning of the 1800s. Like, they finished colonizing India by then. And so India had a lot more cotton, and it was a lot easier to ship. No, was it easier or harder?
Yeah.
Well, they destroyed. India had its own factories that were far more advanced than British factories. They had to cut out. They chopped off thumbs of like people who worked in Indian factories in Bengal. And yeah, they were horrible. See, I'm Indian, so like I'm never defending the British, but I'm just saying that people in the Western Revolution, like in the American Revolution, they saw they saw their own interests, and they knew with whom their interests. So poor white people were also mostly fighting on behalf of the British. The British basically started their colonization all over the world. So like they just didn't have enough manpower. Well, they didn't want to provide more than not have. They didn't want to provide enough manpower to save this like little colony here, because they were already had an alternative source to their cotton from India.
Yeah, I think you're losing your mic a little bit.
Oh, yeah, I'm trying.
Right. It was getting
okay, so let me see if I can do a close up and show people. But the problem, this wire is loose here, and this thing is like kind of falling apart. See, and so I'm trying my best. I need to.
It's okay. Yeah, we'll work on it before Wednesday and figure it out.
Yeah, no, I'll have it fixed before Wednesday. It's just that this wire is a little loose. I need to push it in, but I've been trying all day long and I can't push it in, so I don't know what to do. And this thing is a little loose here too.
And I'm sorry, now I got you obsessing over it again.
Sorry. Yeah, but the ACP person is just 100% wrong. If you read the Declaration of Independence, you know, besides that there being no proletariat in the colonies, it's not even a poor people's revolution.
They're using the revolution, they're using the American Revolution imagery to recruit people for the ACP. And of course,
why? Like, everyone finds the American Revolution to be boring.
Because they think the working class would answer to that, because they only think the working class are the petty bourgeois MAGA.
They would be more successful in recruiting the working class if they used Harry Potter imagery.
Probably, exactly. Instead of calling everyone weirdos and stuff like that, like, you know, accept that people are not, you know,
there are some American history buffs, but for the most part, I can't read American Revolutionary text because it's boring as f. And like they're all just having rich males bloviating is just
yeah. If you're gonna read American history, read like from the people who were enslaved, or read like the labor history, like those.
Those are fun. So yes, I'm just saying American Revolution texts are just boring, but afterwards, when the labor movements come, or when the immigrant, like, those are very exciting. It's just that the American Revolutionary texts are just so boring, and most workers are not like boring themselves to death by reading the Federalist Papers. That's what stupid libertarians do.
Except for Horne's book on the revolution isn't boring. That's actually
no. Gerald Horne's book is not a primary revolutionary text.
I know it's not.
No, Gerald Horne's book is great. It also talks excellent about how race got formed back then, because like back then there was no such thing as black, white, and if you look at, he even touches ancient Greece. Like Homer calls them like. He has 3 different nations. So people who were now Ethiopians are called, or maybe Sudanese. Who are the Nubians, the Ethiopians or the Sudanese?
I don't know.
Maybe Daryl Davis knows. Can he help us?
I know Daryl.
So Homer talks about Egyptians, Nubians, and another ethnicity. Like he says Algerians or Libyan. No, he says Libyans. Um,
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm
um,
not.
yeah. So he doesn't call them all black people. He
Yeah,
like separates them by like language seems to be a bigger distinguisher for him
yeah.
than.
That was, and even like here in these lands, like in the Americas, that was how they kind of grouped themselves too, was languages.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then once you get slavery, when they shipped all these different language speaking slaves and just mushed them together, actually, really cool new languages came, but that's
Mhm.
another story.
Yeah.
In the intermediary, but that's when they didn't want people to have their ethnic identities. They didn't want people to be from Ghana or Mali or Ashuti or whatever kingdom they came from. They just kind of want to be like slaves. But then you can't just have slaves and not have any middlemen. And they didn't want Irish or French, so they just grouped them as white. Like so,
Yeah,
that's when whiteness began, is because of slavery,
yeah, yeah.
and blackness too came because of slavery. So it's a really good, like it tells you like the historic origin of the idea of blackness and the idea of whiteness that came because of slavery.
Yep. Okay, let me read a little more.
Yeah, continue. Sorry.
Instead, he presented us with a utopia contrived by senselessly plucking individual elements from various social formations, taking one thing from the medieval form,
Even though it's not really from the medieval form, but whatever.
another from the new form, and so on. It is obvious that a theory based on this was bound to stand aloof from actual social evolution, for the simple reason that our utopians had to live and act not under social relations formed from elements taken from here and from there, but under those which determine the relation of the peasant to the kulak, the enterprising
Okay, so the kulak, as we know, were the loan sharks. Loan shark, it means fist, and so they would squeeze the juice out of the peasant, like because they were like, how would you in England? Well, I mean, in English, it's something like bleeding them dry. Is that the right metaphor?
Yeah, no, we'd say squeeze. We'd say squeeze. Like, I mean,
No,
that
yeah, yeah, because there are a lot of really good Soviet and Tsarist Russian cartoons where you see this kulak, and he would literally squeeze all the juice out of the peasant.
yeah, okay. Ugh.
And no, kulak literally,
Yeah.
my kulak literally means my fist in Russian.
Of the handicraftsman to the buyer up, of the worker to the factory owner, and which they completely
Oh,
failed to
sorry,
understand.
I'm gonna have to change my battery, but continue. Sorry.
Okay. Their attempts and efforts to remold these ununderstood relations in accordance with their ideal were bound to end in failure. Such, in very general outline, was how the problem of socialism stood in Russia when the Russian Marxists appeared on the scene. What they began with was a criticism of the subjective methods of the earlier socialists. Not satisfied with merely stating the fact of exploitation and condemning it, they desired to explain it. Seeing that the whole post reform history of Russia consisted in the ruin of the masses and the enrichment of the minority, observing the colossal expropriation of the small producers side by side with universal technical progress, noting that these polarizing tendencies arose and increased wherever, and to the extent that commodity economy developed and became consolidated, they could not but conclude that they were confronted with a bourgeoisie capitalist organization of social economy, necessarily giving rise to the expropriation and oppression of the masses. Their practical program was directly determined by this conviction. This program was to join in the struggle of the proletariat against the bourgeoisie, the struggle of the propertyless classes against the propertied, which constitutes the principal content of economic reality in Russia. from the most out-of-the-way village to the most up-to-date and perfected factory. How were they to join in? The answer was again suggested by reality. Capitalism had brought the principal branches of industry to the stage of large-scale machine industry by thus socializing production. It had created the material conditions for a new system and had at the same time created a new social force, the class of factory workers, the urban proletariat, being subjected to the same bourgeoisie exploitation for such in its economic essence, i.e., the exploitation to which the whole working population of Russia is subjected. This class, however, has been placed in a special favorable position as far as its emancipation is concerned. It no longer has any ties with the old society based entirely on exploitation. The very conditions of its labor and the circumstances of life organize it, compel it to think, and enable it to step into the arena of political struggle. It was only natural that the Social Democrats should direct all their attention to and base all their hopes on this class, that they should reduce this program to the development of its class consciousness and direct all their activities towards helping it rise to wage a direct political struggle against the present regime and towards drawing the whole Russian proletariat into this struggle.
Exactly. I mean, so you can't just like randomly borrow forms from random countries and expect a society, because it has to come through that class struggle.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let us now see how Mr. Melowski fights.
Okay, what did you say?
I moved on to the next.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Let us now see how Mr. Melowski fights the Social Democrats. What arguments does he level against their theoretical views, against their political socialist activity? The theoretical views of the Marxists are set forth by the critic in the following manner. The truth, the Marxists are represented as declaring, is that in accordance with the imminent law of historical necessity, Russia will develop her own capitalist production, with all its inherent contradictions and the swallowing up of the small capitalists by the large. And meanwhile, the musique, divorced from the land, will turn into a proletarian, unite, become socialized, and the trick is done. The hat reappears, and it only remains to put the hat on the head of the now happy mankind.
Well, that's the thing that Lenin explains in Imperialism, the highest form of capitalism, is that Russia is not going to develop her own capitalist production. European capitalists or an American capitalists are going to come and use Russian laborers for exploitation.
All right. And so, if you please, the Marxists do not differ in any way from the Friends of the People in their conception of reality. They differ only in their idea of the future. They do not deal at all, it appears, with the present, but only with prospects. There can be no doubt that this is Mr. Melowski's idea. The Marxists, he says, are fully convinced that there is nothing utopian in their forecast of the future, and that everything has been weighed and measured in accordance with the strict dictates of science. Finally, and even more explicitly, the Marxists believe in and profess the immutability of the abstract historical scheme. In a word, we have before us that most banal and vulgar accusation against the Marxists, long employed by all who have nothing substantial to bring against their views. The Marxists profess the immutability of an abstract historical scheme, but this is a downright lie and invention. No Marxist has ever argued anywhere that there must be capitalism in Russia because there was capitalism in the West, and so on. No Marxist has ever regarded Marxist theory as some universally compulsory philosophical scheme of history, as anything more than an explanation of a particular social economic formation. Like he was just writing about capitalism. Only Mr. Michalowski, the subjective philosopher, has managed to display such a lack of understanding of Marx as to attribute to him a universal philosophical theory. And in reply to this, he received from Marx the quite explicit explanation that he was knocking at the wrong door. No Marxist has ever based his social democratic view on anything but the conformity of theory with reality and the history of the given, i.e., the Russian social and economic relations. And he could not have done so because this demand on theory was quite definitely and clearly proclaimed and made the cornerstone of the whole doctrine by the founder of Marxism himself, Marx. Of course, Mr. Michalowski may refute these statements as much as he pleases by arguing that he has heard with his own ears the profession of an abstract historical scheme. But what does it matter to us, social democrats, or to anybody else? The Mr. Michalowski has had occasion to hear all sorts of absurd nonsense from people he has talked to. Does it not merely show that he is very fortunate in the choice of the people he talks to, and nothing more? It is very possible, of course, that the witty interlocutors of the witty philosopher called themselves Marxists, social democrats, and so forth. But who does not know that nowadays, as was noted long ago, every scoundrel likes to array himself in red garments. Do you want to go down to the note there?
Yeah.
All right, let me jump to the note. So that is all this is said on the assumption that Mr. Michalowski has indeed heard professions of the abstract historical schemes and has not invented anything. But I consider it absolutely imperative in the connection to make the reservation that I give this only for what it is worth, Lenin. I just like to say, like they like it is always like, oh well, I heard, like, or you're talking to someone who's a 20-year-old Estonian person. They're like, well, my grandparents said this, and we're like, we don't care. We just don't care. And if Mr. Michalowski is so perspicacious that
I'll look up the word.
Okay, thanks. Cannot distinguish these mummers from Marxists, or
it means shrewd.
What is it?
It means shrewd, and in Russian, it's pranitsatelny. It means shrewd.
Ah, okay. So is so shrewd that he cannot distinguish these mummers from Marxists, or if he has understood Marx so profoundly as not to have noticed this criterion, most emphatically advance of Marx. Of the whole doctrine, the formation of what is going on before our eyes, it only proves again that Mr. Michalowski is not clever and nothing else. At any rate, since he undertook a polemic in the press against the Social Democrats, he should have had in mind the group of socialists who have long borne the name and have borne it alone, so that others cannot be confused with them, and who have their literary representatives, Plekhanov and his circle. Let's see what this says. Plekhanov and his circle.
Let me do that. The reference is made to the Emancipation of Labor Group, first Russian Marxist group founded by Georgy V. Plekhanov in Geneva in 1883. Apart from Plekhanov, not his real name, P.V. Axelrod, also not his real name, L.G. Deutsch, also not his real name, and Vida Zasulish, also not her real name, V.I. Ignatiev belonged to the group. The Emancipation of Labor Group played a great part in disseminating Marxism in Russia. The group translated into Russian, published abroad, and distributed in Russia the works of the founders of Marxism: Manifesto of the Communist Party by Marx and Engels, Wage, Labor, and Capital by Marx, Socialism and Utopian and Scientific by Engels. Plekhanov and his group dealt a severe blow to Narodism. In 1883 and 1885, Plekhanov wrote 2 drafts of a program for Russian Social Democrats, which were published by the Emancipation of Labor Group. This was an important step forward in preparing the ground for and in the establishment of a social democratic party in Russia. An important part in spreading Marxist views in Russia was played by Plekhanov's essay Socialism and the Political Struggle, Our Differences, and the development of the monist view of history. The Emancipation of Labor Group, however, committed serious errors. They clung to remnant views of the Narodniks, underestimated the revolutionary capacity of the peasantry, overestimated the role of the bourgeoisie or liberal. These errors were the embryo of the future of the Menshevik views held by Plekhanov and the other members of the group. The Emancipation of Labor had no practical ties with the working class movement. V.I. Lenin pointed out that the Emancipation of Labor Group only theoretically funded Social Democrat and took the first step in the direction of the working class movement. So yes, Mensheviks thought that in order to overthrow the Tsar, the liberals and the proletariats needed to unite. Of course, the liberals are not going to overthrow the Tsar. Yeah. Lenin was like, what the F? Of course not. Liberals aren't going to do crap. He was like, no, it needs to be the proletariats and the peasants that need to unite.
Yeah, no, exactly. It had to be the ones who were actually
oppressed,
not comfortable under
exactly
for the Tsar.
And that was the same formula Mao used too, but Mao said it was basically the factories were were on the lookout for people like Lenin in Mao's era, so they couldn't agitate in the factories, because basically if there was like one one pamphlet on labor, they would go and shoot everyone in the factory. So Mao was like, okay, we can't agitate in the factory because we're just gonna kill them all. So what they had to do was they had to start in the villages and then have the villages come over and help the factory workers. So it was just a little different, just because people had seen the Russian Revolution and they were like, okay, okay, so the factory is where we need to put our armed guards in.
Yeah.
And it's a lot harder to put your armed guards through 100,000 villages than in like one factory.
Yeah. Hey, you want to go?
Let's continue.
Okay. And had he done so, and that obviously is what anybody with any decency should have done, and had he even consulted the first social democratic work, Plekhanov's Our Differences, he would have found in its very first pages a categorical declaration made by the author on behalf of all members of the circle. We in no case wish to cover our program with the authority of a great name, i.e. the authority of Marx. Do you understand Russian, Mr. Melowskis? Do you understand the difference between professing abstract schemes and entirely disclaiming the authority of Marx when passing judgment on Russian affairs? God, I wish Lenin was alive for Twitter right now.
I know. I mean, we did try to set up. We'll continue our Lenin Twitter account. We use Coach, but Lenin would be. I mean, yesterday Elon Musk tweeted about Trump being on Epstein's planes. Did you see that tweet?
The whole fight was so funny. Yeah, like they were just going back and forth. It was like Trump like said something about Elon, because Elon said, "Oh, I didn't know. I don't like that bill. The bill is bad," because Elon, now has to leave the White House.
Yeah. Well, the thing about Elon is he's African. Why the F is he even commenting on American bills?
I know. So then he says the bill is bad. Then Trump says, "You knew all about the bill." And then he says, "I didn't know about the bill." Then and Trump's like says something nasty about Elon, and then Elon's like, "Yeah, you were on Epstein's planes." It's like,
yeah.
This is the state of the United States. This is our government.
I mean, both parties have been on Epstein's planes doing the whatever. Bill Clinton too. So, no, both parties, lots of senators.
And I said, like, people are saying Elon was probably there, and I go, you know what? Elon wasn't popular enough yet. Like
Elon was old enough. Like that would have been 20 years ago, right?
Yeah. So Elon,
like in his 30s, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know if Elon would have, like, there were some actors and actresses that were around the same age, but I don't think he had the clout at that point.
No, yeah, back then he was a PayPaler.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I
so
don't.
he didn't have the money nor the clout to be on, or the important. No one would, or the importance or the need to
Yeah, they didn't care
blackmail
about
to
it.
be on Epstein's planes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Oh, he would have been.
He had the power and the clout and the need to blackmail, like, but they didn't need him to be blackmailed yet.
Yeah. All right. So, do you realize that you acted dishonestly by misrepresenting the first opinion you happened to hear from your interlocutors at Marxists, and by ignoring the published declaration made by a prominent member of social democracy on behalf of the whole group? And
Yeah,
then,
this is just like victims of communism saying, "Oh, the communists sent me jail for 8 years um for writing something against Stalin," and it's like it was in the middle of World War II, and you were creating a terrorist or the manifesto for a terrorist organization to like exterminate, to commit genocide. This is
and
Alexander Zilzenstein, by the way.
yeah,
Weird.
yeah. What was it? What the hell is his name? My Knopf's Myasnikov. That's the one I'm thinking of. I was just reading something out of his letter because they were using something from the Myasnikov letter. So he was the one. He was the first like Bolshevik that got like thrown out after the revolution, I think. And
Okay, he probably deserved it. I'm like
yeah.
that. There's a really cute clip with the Georgian old man. I'll put it up for next week, where this like guy says, "My grandfather got killed with Stalin," and he's like, "Stalin's a very good man, so your grandfather probably deserved it."
I know. Oh yeah. I remember that. That is. And then the declaration becomes even more explicit. I repeat, Plekhanov says, that the most consistent Marxists may disagree in the appraisal of the present Russian situation. Our doctrine is the first attempt at applying this particular scientific theory to the analysis of very complicated and entangled social relations. It would seem difficult to speak more clearly. The Marxists unreservedly borrowed from Marx's theory only its invaluable methods, without which an elucidation of social relations is impossible. And consequently, they see the criterion of their judgment of these relations not in abstract schemes and such like nonsense at all, but in its fidelity and conformity to reality. Perhaps you think that in making these statements, the author actually had something else in mind, but that is not so. The question he was dealing with was, must Russia pass through the capitalist phase of development?
And this was the question that the Narodniks said, "No, we're just going to skip capitalism and have like a peasant utopian commune."
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, Russia, capitalism is happening wherever it is,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a difference between capitalism in England versus capitalism in Russia versus capitalism in India.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Russia had to go through a capitalism phase, but it does not look just like England, where you have nice factories and
Yeah.
There were nice factories, but terrible factories. But then, like, they needed soldiers to like go shoot Indians in the Amritsar massacres, so they kind of had to elevate the standard of living for the average English person.
Yeah. It's kind of the same. Like, I mean, communism doesn't happen in every place the same either. Like, you have conditions, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
but like Cuba, the government of Cuba versus the government of Vietnam, it's completely different.
Yeah. All right, so hence the question was not given a Marxist formulation at all, but was in conformity with the subjective methods of various native philosophers of ours, who see the criterion of this must in the policy of the authorities, or in the activities of society, or in the ideal of a society that corresponds to human nature. And it's similar to
Let me look that up in Russian, okay?
I want to see similar. I want to know what twaddle
That's what
is.
I'm going to look it up.
So it is fair to ask, how should a man who believes in abstract schemes have answered such a question? He would have spoken of the incontrovertibility of the dialectical process, of the general philosophical importance of Marxist theory, of the inevitability. Why am I having trouble saying this word? Inevitability of every country passing through the phase of, and so on and so forth. Did you figure it out?
No, I'll figure it out. I'm just like.
And how did Plekhanov answer it? In the only way a Marxist could. He left aside entirely the question of the must as being an idle one that could be of interest only to subjectivists, and dealt exclusively with real social and economic relations and their actual evolution. And that is why he gave no direct answer to this wrongful formulated question, but instead replied, Russia has entered the capitalist path. And Mr. Melowskis talks with the air of an expert about belief in abstract historical schemes, about the immanent law of necessity, and similar incredible nonsense. And he calls this a polemic against the Social Democrats. If this is a polemicist, then I simply cannot understand what a windbag is. Oh, Lenin. One must also observe in connection with Mr. Melowskis' argument quoted above that he presents the views of the Social Democrats as being Russia will develop her own capitalist production. Evidently, in the opinion of this philosopher, Russia has not got her own capitalist production. The author apparently shares the opinion that Russian capitalism is confined to 1.5 million workers. We shall later on again meet with this childish idea of our friends of the people who class all the other forms of exploitation of free labor under heaven knows what heading. Russia will develop her own capitalist production with all of its inherent contradictions, and meanwhile the music, how do you say that? Music?
Mujik.
Separated from the land will turn into a proletarian. The farther in the wood, the more trees there are. So there are no inherent contradictions in Russia. Or, to put it plainly, there is no exploitation of the mass of people by the handful of capitalists. There is no ruin of the vast majority of the population and no enrichment of a few. The music has still to be separated from the land. But what is the entire post-reform history of Russia, if not the wholesale expropriation of the peasantry, proceeding with unparalleled intensity? One must possess great courage indeed to say such things publicly. And Mr. Melowskis possesses that courage. Marx dealt with a ready-made proletariat and a ready-made capitalism, whereas he have still to create them. Russia has still to create a proletariat. In Russia, the only country where such a hopeless poverty of the masses and such shameless exploitation of the working people can be found, which has been compared, and legitimately so, to England as regards the condition of the poor, and where the starvation of millions of people is in permanent thing existing side by side, for instance, with a steady increase in the export of grain. In Russia, there is no proletariat. I think Mr. Melowskis deserves to have a monument erected to him in his own lifetime for these classic words. Do you want me to read the?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm still looking at the. I found the right area, but I just need to read through. Go ahead.
The note is, but perhaps here too, Mr. Melowskis may try to wriggle out of declaring that he had no intention of saying that there was no proletariat at all in Russia, but only that there was no capitalist proletariat. Is that so? Then why did he not say so? The whole question is one of whether the Russian proletariat is a proletariat characteristic of the bourgeois or of some other organization of social economy, Who is to blame if in the course of 2 whole articles you did not utter a word about this, the only serious and important question, but preferred instead to talk all sorts of nonsense and reach the craziest conclusions? Okay. We shall incidentally see later that it is a constant and most consistent tactic of the Friends of the People to shut their eyes pharistically to the intolerable condition of the working people in Russia, to depict this condition as having merely been shaken so that only the efforts of cultured society and the government are needed for everything to be put on the right track. These knights think that if they shut their eyes to the fact that the condition of the working masses is bad, not because it has been shaken, but because these masses are being shamelessly robbed by a handful of exploiters, that if they bury their heads in the sand like ostriches, so as not to see the exploiters will disappear. And when the Social Democrats tell them that it is shameful cowardice to fear to look reality in the face, when they take the fact of exploitation as their starting point and say that its only possible explanation lies in the bourgeois organization of Russian society, which is splitting the mass of people into the proletarian and the bourgeoisie, and in the class character of the Russian state, which is nothing but the organ of the rule of bourgeoisie, and that therefore the only way out lies in the class struggle of the proletariat against the bourgeoisie, these Friends of the People begin to howl that the Social Democrats want to dispossess the people of their land, that they want to destroy our people's economic organization. I need to take a sip of water.
Okay. I'm still trying to find the win back quote. So I'm like very close to it.
That's okay. I can keep going. I just needed a
little. Okay, so right now I'm in Kak Atvichal Plekhanov, as in like how did Plekhanov answer? So I'm just a few paragraphs behind. Go ahead.
We now come to the most outrageous part of all this indecent, to say the least, polemic, namely Mr. Melowskis' criticism.
Oh, okay. So he calls it unbelievable bullshit. Okay, so this is what they translate unbelievable bullshit to win back. He says, "Тому подобно невероятная ирония, и называет это полемикой против социал-демократов." What bullshit? This is called a polemic against social democrats. Okay, so he literally, so they kind of made it less. In Russian, you can use the word bullshit. Erundi doesn't mean like, it's not a swear word. Like,
I know. It shouldn't be a swear word anyways, but whatever.
No, but yeah, they should have just translated it to bullshitter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Melowskis' criticism of the political activities of the Social Democrats. Everybody realizes that the activities carried on among the workers by socialists and agitators cannot be honestly discussed in our legal press, and that the only thing a decent censored periodical can do in this connection is to maintain a tactful silence. Mr. Melowski has forgotten this very elementary rule and has not scrupled to use his monopoly contact with the reading public in order to sling mud at socialists. However, means of combating this unscrupulous critic will be found even if outside the legal publications.
Yes. I mean, like, it's kind of like an unfair fight if they can't print anything against what you say.
Yeah, exactly. As far as I understand, Mr. Melowski says with assumed naivety, the Russian Marxists can be divided into 3 categories: Marxist spectators, indifferent observers of the process; passive Marxists, they only ally the birth pangs, they are not interested in people of the land, and direct their attention and hopes to those who are already separated from the means of production. And they
never had the means of production to be separated from. They were separated from their farmlands because they kind of got really poor and didn't have any food, and so then they had to go to factories looking for work.
Yeah. An active Marxist who bluntly insist on the further ruin of the countryside.
No, they didn't insist on the further ruin. They just said that if industrialization progresses, you just will have countryside empty out and people will move to the city. Like, it's not that they want that. It's just, it's inevitable.
Mm-hmm. What is this, Mr. Critic? Must surely know that the Russian Marxists are socialists point out whose point of departure is the view that the reality of our environment is capitalist society and that there is only one way out of it, the class struggle of the proletariat against the bourgeoisie. How, then, and on what grounds does he mix them up with some sort of senseless vulgarity? What right, moral of course, has he to extend the terms Marxist to people who obviously do not accept the most elementary and fundamental tenets of Marxism? People who have never and nowhere acted as a distinct group and have never and nowhere announced a program of their own. Mr. Michalowski has left himself a number of loopholes for justifying such outrageous methods. Perhaps he jokes with the easy air of a society fop. These are not real Marxists, but they consider and proclaim themselves as such. Where have they proclaimed it, and when? In the liberal and radical saloons of St. Petersburg, in private letters? Be it so. Well, then talk to them in your saloons, in your correspondence. But you come out publicly and in the press against people who, under the banner of Marxism, have never come out publicly anywhere. And you have the effrontery to claim that you are polemicizing against social democrats, although you know that this name is borne only by one group of revolutionary socialists and that nobody else should be confused with them. And the note on that is, I shall dwell on at least one factual reference which occurs in Mr. Michalowski's article. Anybody who has read that article will have to admit that he includes even Mr. Skvortsov, author of The Economic Causes of Starvation, among the quote-unquote Marxists. But as a matter of fact, this gentleman does not call himself a Marxist. And the most elementary acquaintance with the works of social democrats is sufficient for anybody to see from their standpoint he is nothing but a most vulgar bourgeois. What sort of Marxist is he if he does not understand that the social environment for which he projects his progressive schemes is a bourgeois environment, and that therefore all agricultural improvements actually to be observed even in peasant farming are bourgeois progress, which improves the position of the minority but proletarianizes the masses. What sort of Marxist is he if he does not understand that the state to which he addresses his projects is a class state capable only of supporting the bourgeoisie and oppressing the proletariat? Back up. Mr. Michalowski twists and turns like a schoolboy caught red-handed. I am not the least to blame here. He tries to make the reader believe. I heard with my own and saw with my own eyes.
Who did you hear? Who did you see?
Excellent. We are quite willing to believe that there is nobody in your field of vision but vulgarians and scoundrels. But what have we social democrats to do with it? Who does not know that at the present time when not only socialist activity, but any social activity that is all independent and honest evokes political persecution for everyone actually working under some banner, be it narodovism.
Okay, let me read this part now.
Okay.
Okay, so volia means will, naroda means people, so narodna volia means people's will. Okay. The tenants of Narodna Volstvo, members of the secret Narodnik terrorist political organization Narodnaya Volia, People's Will, which arose in the August of 1879. Following the split in the secret society Zemlya y Volia, which means land and will, free will, The Narodnaya Volya was headed by an executive committee which included A.I. Zhelyabov, A.D. Mikhailov, M.F. Fralenka, Mazarov и Figner и Perovskaya, Kwiatkowski. Immediate object of the Narodnaya Volya was the overthrow of the Tsarist autocracy. While their program provided for the organization of a permanent popular representative body elected on the basis of universal suffrage, the proclamation of democratic liberties, the land be given to the people, the elaboration of measures for factories to pass into the hands of the workers, the Narodnovoltsi were unable to, however, to find the road to the masses of the people and took to political conspiracy and individual terror. The terroristic struggle of Narodnovoltsi was not supported by a mass revolutionary movement and enabled the government to crush the organization by resorting to fear persecution and death sentences, including Lenin's brother. After 1881, the Narodnaya Volya fell to pieces. Repeated attempts to revive it during the 1800s, 1880s ended in failure. For example, the terrorist group organized in 1886, headed by Alexander Ilyich Ulyanov, Lenin's brother, and P.Y. Shevryov. And this is actually how Lenin noticed that liberals were useless. So his father had already died, and his mom, like back then, they didn't have trains or anything, so she had to ride a late-night horse carriage from the village of Simburgs to someplace a little far away, so that she could take a train to go to Petrograd to see her brother in prison. And so she asked all the liberals in the town, will anyone be willing to escort her? And they're like, yeah. No, you're going to have to ride all alone at night when you're raped by bandits or whatever. And so that's the first time when Lenin was like, okay, these people are useless Fs.
Yeah.
Which shared traditions. After an unsuccessful attempt to assassinate Alexander III, the group was exposed and its active members executed. While he criticized the erroneous utopian program of Narodnovoltsi, Lenin expressed the great respect for the selfless struggle waged by its members against Tsarism. In 1899, the protest by the Russian Social Democrats, he pointed out that the representatives of the old Narodnaya Volya managed to play an enormous role in the history of Russia, despite the fact that only narrow social strata supported the few heroes, and despite the fact that it was no means a revolutionary series that served as a banner of the movement. A protest by Russian Social Democrats.
Okay. Marxism, or even, let us say, constitutionalism, there are several score phrasemongers who, under cover of that name, conceal their liberal cowardice. And in addition, perhaps several downright rascals who are feathering their own nests. Is it not obvious that only the meanest vulgarity could make any of these trends responsible for the fact that its banner is being soiled, privately and secretly at that, by all sorts of riffraff?
Yes.
Mr. Melowskis' whole argument is one chain to distortions, misrepresentations, and manipulation. We saw above that he completely distorted the truths, which are the Social Democrats' starting point, presenting them in a way in which no Marxist at any time or place has or could have presented them. And if he had set forth the actual social democratic conception of Russian reality, he could not but have seen that one can conform to these views in only one way, namely by helping to develop the class consciousness of the proletariat, by organizing and uniting it for the political struggle against the present regime. He has, however, one other trick up his sleeve. With an air of injured innocence, he phrasically lifts up his eyes to heaven and unctuously declares, I am very glad to hear that, but I cannot understand what you are protesting against. That is exactly what he says in Russian Wealth. Read my comment on passive Marxists more attentively, and you will see that I say, from the ethical standpoint, no objection can be made.
This kind of reminds me of like Fox News when they're like, when it's obvious when they have signs like Black Lives Matter or Free Palestine, and they're like, what are they little kids protesting against? Like,
Yeah.
I don't even know. And it's like, it's obvious written there, like what they're protesting against.
I can't possibly know what they're protesting.
Exactly.
This, of course, is nothing but a rehash of his former wretched subterfuges. Tell us, please, how one would categorize the conduct of a person who declared that he was criticizing. You okay?
Yeah.
He was criticizing social revolutionary neuroticism at the time when no other type of neuroticism had yet appeared.
I mean, there was no other neuroticism, so he should just criticize neuroticism.
Exactly. And who proceeded to say approximately the following. The neurotics, as far as I understand, are divided into three categories. The consistent neurotics, he likes these three categories, I guess. The consistent neurotics, who completely accept the idea that the mujiks in exact accordance with his desires make a...
That they were just like creeping out the mujiks by being city dwellers who dressed in peasant gear. They're just creeping them out.
Make a general principle of the birch and wife beating, and generally further the abominable policy of the government of the knout and the club. What's a knout?
Hold on, I'm looking it up. It's like a whip. Yeah, back then peasants.
Oh, is it a knot? Is it called knot? Not knout. It's probably not.
It's called. Let's see.
Which has been called a people's policy. Then shall we say the cowardly neurotics, who are interested in the opinions of the mujik and are only striving to transplant to Russia an alien revolutionary movement by means of associations and such like, against which, however, no objection can be made from the ethical standpoint unless it be the slipperiness of the path, which may easily convert to a cowardly neurotic into a consistent or courageous one. And lastly, the courageous neurotic, who carry out to the full of the people's ideals of the enterprising mujik, and accordingly settle on the land in order to live as kulaks in good earnest.
No, that's not exactly what. No, neurotics kind of wanted like a socialist society. They just didn't know how to get there, basically.
Yeah. They knew what they wanted. They just didn't know the path.
No, the path that needed to be taken to get there.
Yeah. All decent people, of course, would characterize this as vile and vulgar scoffing. And if, furthermore, the people who said such things could not be rebutted by the neurotics in the same press.
Because they were illegal.
If, moreover, these ideas of these neurotics had hitherto been expounded only illegally, so that many people had no exact idea of what they were and might easily believe whatever they were told about the neurotics, then whoever would agree that such a person is. But perhaps Mr. Melowskis himself has not yet quite forgotten the word that fits here. But enough. Many similar insinuations by Mr. Melowskis
still remain. That fits there, by the way.
Huh?
Oh, I'm just making Sukinsen means son of a bitch in Russian, so that's the Russian word that would fit there.
Ah, okay. Many similar insinuations by Mr. Melowskis still remain, but I know of no job more fatiguing, more thankless, and more disgusting than to have to wade through this filth, to collect insinuations scattered here and there, to compare them to the search for at least one serious objection. Enough. April 1894.
Yeah, the research that he did is impressive. Like, he found articles from 1870 that Mr. Melowskis wrote, and I'm impressed how he found them.
All right. Do you want to look at
comments? YouTube comments?
Is there anything we want to?
Yeah. Daryl Davis said Nubia is Sudan.
Okay.
Hold on. My thing is, when are you at the point of seeking out communism and seeking out communist organizations? How have you not gotten out of the matrix of the American Revolution? Exactly. They're not that different from the Narodniks, actually, the ACP in this. Like, the Narodniks were like people who were educated in Paris, and then they'd come back and wear the puffy Russian peasant pants and the curly shoes that the peasants would wear, and wear the furry hats, and then go to villages like, "Hey, hello, fellow villager, want a revolution?" But when that's not what the peasant wanted, like the peasant could like they thought that was what the peasant could relate to. So the ACB is kind of exactly like the Narodniks in that. So they have a stereotype of the American, typical American, who apparently reads George Washington in the Federalist Papers.
I just can't. Asha, it's just like all I do, like I don't even go to, like, I don't, they come to me and they start saying stuff to me. And like,
okay, ever since my debate with Haz, ACP has not said anything to me.
Well, I keep bringing up that he ran away from you, and then they won't talk about it.
Exactly.
Why don't you debate Haz? I go, why? So he can run away from me like he did my friend Asha? No.
So yeah, I even tried to be polite. It's like, yeah, we should like hang out when I'm in Michigan again or whatever. But it was just exactly that's why they're not approaching me. But it's so stupid. So yeah, they have this like George Washington Federalist paper reading American Worker. Like I can't see somebody working at like a Ford plant and then coming home to read the Federalist work papers. Is like patriotic. Like, no, if you're not, you can't be that patriotic if your country F's you over.
Yeah.
Like, workers are not that like, it's the petty bourgeoisie that are patriotic because they have it good in America.
That's exactly that's who they're getting, because they allow landlordship. Like, you have to have a bit, like, they want them all to be petty bourgeois. They want them all to be.
So what's even the point of your stupid effing communist party? Like, is it to like take away from real communist parties who are actually protesting, donating to food banks, whatever?
Yeah. They beg me to leave them alone, and I go, I will leave you all alone when you stop calling yourself communist. Well, they did just come out with a video, I think at the beginning of the week, and they call themselves social patriots.
That sounds like national socialism.
They're sock pats. Not to be confused with pat socks. They are sock pats.
What's the difference between pat socks and sock pats?
There was no difference.
Okay, no difference.
There is no difference. And oh, can I ask you a question? So if you were to pull a clip, like if you were to just like screenshot a clip from something and someone asked you to cite it and you don't cite it, and the person goes in and types the whole clip out and finds out that, yes, it is an Engels quote, but it was pulled from a Zionist anti-communist who's trying to prove that Engels is anti-Semitic, his name being Silberner.
Even though he was working with Marx the whole time.
Yeah. Why would you pull that? Like, why would you use the quote from a Silberner piece? Why would you not find the original?
Read Engels.
Yeah.
And it's funny because the first like prejudice against the communist was the Judeo-Bolshevik, like Marx being Jewish as a stereotype.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, it's not that Vulture is trying to say that he's anti-Semitic, but why would you pull that clip?
Because you haven't read the first original. It's the first time you stumbled upon that clip.
Yeah,
like
why are you reading Silberner?
Yeah, I would have like read Engels first and encountered that first time, so I could directly quote Engels. But
he finally finds the real piece because it's from like 1846, so it's not. It's not readily available. So he goes, this is where
guy. Oh, it was Vosh who was like, I haven't read the book on authority, and it's like 5 pages long. It was Vosh, right? Who called it a book?
Yeah.
Okay. What's he doing? Like, he's actually gone eerily quiet, or people. I have no idea how he has such a big audience when he's so boring.
He's not. Definitely, I'm not seeing him on Twitter. He might be over on Blue Sky. I just can't.
I haven't seen him on neither on like, it's funny. My one viral clip with the Vosh was like when he said North Koreans are the most uneducated. I was like, no, I think you're confusing it with your Discord server. but if you look at the educated the DPRK education, their books are available online in 4 languages. You just need to get a VPN if you're in America, and the KP domain, like there's so many of them, you can just go download them and see what they actually learn. In fact, their mathematics and like science books in English is actually better than anything you have in America. Yeah. But yeah, Vosh has been quiet. It was great. I like not hearing Vosh.
Yeah. Cobra, can you keep your fiance contained?
What happened to his? Who's
He's
his
saying his
fiance?
fiance is full vulture.
I'm sorry. Yeah, he's a. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Well, maybe instead of keeping him contained, actually, like, introduce him to real Marxism, and then you guys can get
Yes.
married.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Cobra,
Yeah,
you have to actually make him a true Marxist first.
yeah. You have to read him like at bedtime. Maybe you guys can, or maybe you could have kind of an activity where you guys read Marx and Engels together.
Oh, that would be nice. I think.
Yeah.
Read some Marx to him.
Yeah, he'll be fine once you kind of educate him on proper Marxism.
Yes. Yes. Well, that's what I try to do with them. I'm always like, well, and then so when I ask for a site and he's like, Engels said it, I'm like, I want to know what piece it's from. Like, do you not know what a site is? Like, I need to know because I need context. I go, the reason why I found out that you pulled that quote from a Silberner piece, and you're mad that I told everyone it was from a Silberner piece, is because you did not cite it when I asked you to, because I wanted context and I wanted to read it.
Oh yeah, exactly. But that's the thing. Like, the ACP is exactly like modern day Narodniks.
Yeah.
I never realized how Narodniki they are.
No, we were
So
trying
yeah,
to figure that
they
out.
have a stereotype of what the American worker is without actually having seen a American worker.
Yeah.
Mythical worker, and they think that they are patriotic, but they're not. They're just trying to. Oh, sorry, my battery cut out. I'm gonna put in a new battery.
All right. Yeah. No, they really. No, that makes sense because we were trying to put our thumb down on it, like what exactly? Because it's not like, well, we had a video, like even one of their members was on TikTok, and she said this is why they're all mad at me this week, because my friend's up in the panel with them, and she says something about, because one of the people that are up on the panel claiming that he's a member of ACP has a bio saying white pride and all that stuff. So, so my friend asked,
what real communists read Ho Chi Minh's My Path to Leninism. He explains that Lenin was not racist while everyone else in that era were racist MFers, and that's why he went to Lenin. And read what Lenin has to. He talks about slavery and the U.S. South and how they. And he's like, the shame on America for the, like, one of the Lenin quotes is shame on America for the plight of the Negroes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then there's Mr. Twister, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. We've talked about that story, but no, I mean,
here on air today.
No, we didn't on air today. You were telling me earlier.
Yeah, exactly. Like when we were talking about the ACP. So it's like, being not racist is a fundamental tenet of communism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's because it's like the workers of the world. It's
workers of the world unite, not white people of the world unite.
Yeah, exactly. So this guy has this white pride thing going. And so my friend asked, like, hey, you're in ACP, and like there's two other members from the ACP there. And the female one goes, oh yeah, we have a problem with letting fashion, like we let fashion, like she said.
That sounds like not a communist party, because the communist party are afraid that they would get shot. Yeah. Oh, actually, Julius Streicher's last words, I just heard about it. He says the Bolsheviks will one day shoot you too, to the British and Americans. It's like, oh, inshallah.
That would be good. That would be good.
Inshallah. But yeah, exactly. So if you cannot screen for fascist people, you don't have a good communist party.
Daryl's saying they are more jingoist than patriotic. Much of this journey is realizing you were robbed of patriotism. As Black people, we were largely robbed of that ability to be patriotic. You can't just force it.
How can you be a patriotic towards a country that sucks? Like, you just can't. Michael Parenti made me feel patriotic towards Yugoslavia in his lecture, because Yugoslavia deserves patriotism.
Well, they turned to Michael Parenti
Tito, I wrote an article long back about this, or maybe somebody else wrote it. So he was in contact with Josephine Baker. Back then, they were having trouble like building historically Black colleges. So he said that like they could build it in like Serbia, and he even gave land. But then I think he died, or she died, or somebody died. But Tito was also he started the non-alignment movement, very anti-racist. So it's but you can't be a patriotic toward a country that just doesn't deserve it. If I lived in Cuba, I'd totally be patriotic towards modern Cuba. It's just that how can you be a patriotic towards a country whose history is genocide, slavery, and bombing brown people?
Yeah, and they'll turn back and they'll be like, like the labor revolution, they would carry an American flag. I'm like, it was a different thing. They were like, that was for their people. Like they were like, like Eugene.
The labor revolution really carried an American flag, or did they carry an IWW flag?
They were carrying. At times and I will admit there was American flags here and there in the labor history stuff, but it was mainly, first of all, you're using Eugene Debs, who was running for president, so of course a flag was going to be.
Oh yeah, okay, that's different. But he actually got 20% of the votes from prison.
I know.
Imagine if he was not in prison and was able to actually campaign.
Yeah, and there's things like that, and I get like they'll turn to like Michael Parenti using like the super patriotism, but like Michael Parenti's like, I care.
Super patriotism is different. It's just a manifestation of how American patriotism is used to shield. Like he's making a larger point.
Yeah. So he's saying it's fine to care about your neighbors and the people, you know what I mean? Like, he's
like, it's fine to be patriotic, but that's not the way patriotism is being used today.
Yes.
And then he goes to illustrate how it's being used to cover up critique for the empire.
And especially since World War II. And then when the United States really gained so much power after that, like, that's like people weren't like being patriotic after that. You know what I mean? Like they weren't like holding in America.
People weren't being patriotic after that. And it was like a lot of it came from Vietnam, where people were protesting by burning the American flag, and people who were reactionary against the Vietnam War protesters were like hoisting up the American flag to say that I support the Vietnam War.
Yeah. So,
but I don't know how anyone could support the Vietnam War after they heard about ears for beers.
Any of it.
Yeah. There was like the ears for beers is exceptionally gross. We have a video clip somewhere on our YouTube channel.
I wonder how many. I want to know. I want to look into that because I know like Parenti, because he was a little older, like he wasn't. He said
he was in the anti-communist paradigm. He said he was like a typical liberal until the Vietnam War happened. And then he was like, they were doing all sorts of disgusting things. I couldn't be part of that anymore. That's kind of what made me into a communist.
But I wonder how many communists were made from that too, because like.
Well, Parenti was made, at least Parenti.
Yeah, which is good.
And so it's just bizarre, and like I swear they would have more success if they used Game of Thrones imagery or even Harry Potter imagery over the American Revolution imagery.
Yeah. And it's just going to be hard for the next year and a half.
Mostly, I feel like they'll self-destruct with whatever kind of like Ponzi scheme they're running. They seem like a MLM to me, so I'm sure they'll self-destruct soon.
Maybe the United States will be no more exactly 250 years in.
We don't know. I mean, I feel like once they start shit with China, China is going to be the Red Army that liberates the fascist capital with the red flag on the Washington Monument. Lenin predicted that, if you remember. He had a piece where, like, people of China will liberate Europe from the.
Oh, really? I don't remember.
Who read that piece?
Oh.
It's called. It's either called Civilized Europeans, and one piece is about like they're both sarcastic. He doesn't mean Asians are barbaric. Like in one piece, he calls it Civilized Europeans and Barbaric Asians, and then he talks about how this British judge ended up raping like a 7-year-old girl in India.
Oh, all right.
And then there's a second one where he has the opposite title, like Civilized Asians versus European. And then he talks about how China has 300 million people, but they're very revolutionary people. They're already starting protests, and like one day people of China will liberate all of Europe from the woes of capitalism.
Now I'm remembering I'm remembering those pieces now.
Yeah. So Lenin predicted, like Lenin always knew it was China that was going to liberate the world from capitalism, not Russia.
Interesting. Yeah. Maybe.
So that's when the U.S. as it is but they don't really want to. I don't know what there are Republican senators that are crazy enough to provoke China over Taiwan, but China has hypersonic jets and more advanced technology than the U.S. and I don't even know what they're thinking. Like because the U.S. can't really fight people who are not peasants in their flip flops like in Afghanistan. Like they can't fight a real army.
What of the people of Taiwan? Like what?
Well, the people. Okay, both the government of Taiwan and in the video, once I finish like making it into a decent length, thing, like I'll put it up. But both the government of Taiwan and the government of China recognizes the one China policy, which means they eventually will reunite and they need to negotiate the terms and conditions on which it will be based on.
Yeah.
But the U.S. for the past 20 years has been like sending these color revolution NED trolls over who have been like staunch Taiwanese separatists. The DPP party is an example. And so basically the U.S. at one point controlled the entire Pacific Ocean like naval route.
Yeah.
And when you have China, India, Singapore, like other countries that are popping up that have naval power, they just are not going to be able to monopolize that. So every year they try to do this really annoying thing where they go into everyone's sea space.
Mm-hmm.
And for the past 2 years, it's not just China, but a lot of other countries in that area have been just like "F you, get out" kind of thing. Yeah. And so they know that they can't like just control that area with their navy anymore.
Yeah.
So they know that like if they wanted to continue their imperialist ways, they will have to like defeat China, but they can't because they don't know how to defeat anyone who's not a peasant in their flip flops. And so but they're not. But China provides such an existential threat, as in China, for example, is paying off IMF loans for all these African countries that the U.S. could once control, and Djibouti invited China to build a naval base there because Djibouti, there's a Strait of Aden. It's such a small area between the Suez Canal, and so the U.S. before would be able to bully Djibouti, but now they can't, and so. And the U.S. don't have unlimited access to minerals that they need to build future technology. China has a lot of hoarded, has a lot of minerals. So they kind of understand that this is, and the U.S. has admitted that it cannot compete with the Belt and Road Initiative because their own memos, because they don't have the technology to compete with the Belt and they just can't lay those high-speed rails. They just can't do it.
Yeah.
So the U.S. method of imperialism is going to become less and less profitable. So they have to, quote unquote, try to find a way to defeat China. Like in the 90s, they thought, hey, if we just put our businesses there, it'll go in the same way of the Soviet Union. But Deng was way smarter than they knew. Yeah. So now they have to provoke a conflict with China over the South China Sea.
Yeah. And do you think that the Communist Party has a good control over the capitalists in China?
Oh, they have a great control. So what they do is for certain industries, they allow some capitalism, as in some foreign investors, but it's very limited on the scope. And they have, it's like a lot of Americans don't understand it. So sometimes they're like, oh, they're letting in like Nike.
Yeah.
It's like, no, they made Nike give up all their trade secrets, and the factories are eventually like their stock's going to get diluted every like 5 years until Nike becomes the minority shareholder in this nationalist thing. So they have very good control. Like everyone should read Deng's plans. It's like just like Stalin's 5-year plan, but made for 50 years.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. No, there's a
And now
lot of,
a lot of Africans, students, instead of coming to the U.S. and learning whatever crap they learn in the U.S., they're choosing to study free in China. Like they're learning Mandarin, and guess what else they're learning? Marxism, Leninism. So this wave of new African scholars will be trained in Marxism and Leninism. So there'll be a lot of socialist revolutions down there.
Yeah, definitely. Have you heard from what's going on with Booker?
Booker. Yes.
Nikki.
He had some legal trouble. I've texted him. So he's laying low for a little while. Booker Tiomole?
Yeah.
Yeah, he had some legal trouble because actually the Kenyan Communist Party is pretty successful. They have like quite a few seats in parliament.
Yeah. Okay.
Unlike the American Communist Party, who has 0 seats in any place. I always say copy winners and not losers.
Yep. No, they call it's very telling that they call a lot of like black liberation, Marxists, just leftist weirdos is what they call them.
Yeah, no. I mean, they've just, once you have seats in parliament, you've achieved way more than the American Communist Party has.
Yeah. No. They don't want to look towards that. They want to look towards the American Revolution.
Losers.
And Haas talks about the Constitution constantly. And
have you read the Constitution?
All like these are liberal document, and you want to keep a liberal document? Yeah, okay.
It's not even a liberal document. It's like a slave owner document.
Yeah, which is a liberal. I mean, the liberals made excuses for being slave owners, so I'm calling it a liberal document.
I thought liberals were like capitalists, but I guess they're...
Well, no, the liberalism, like if you go through like Lusardo's liberalism, he points out like how the dudes in England and in America that were like doing this whole liberalism thing and writing on it, that they constantly were making excuses for slavery.
Interesting. Okay, I need to study more into liberalism. So I've kind of studied Locke and like the early stage capitalism.
You'd like Lusardo's book. Read Lusardo Liberalism.
Dominic, okay, I will check that. Cobra Commander says, you can't be communist and patriotic for America. 2 things contradict each other. Mm-hmm. Comfort girls still blow my mind. Yeah, actually, the Americans, when they took over Korea, like they didn't get rid of the Japanese. The Japanese used Korean comfort women, and Americans didn't get rid of it. In fact, the dictator Park or Rhee? I forgot. Actually, like said, be a prostitute for patriotism, kind of flyers. And so a lot of people talk about how, like, when Kim Il-sung would have these broadcasts where he's talked about how Korean women are being sold to Americans for prostitute, like they thought he was, but he was not. He was telling 100% absolute 100% truth in those broadcasts. So right there. Let's see what else. My favorite was like a month ago when ACP tried to claim Haz as a minority. Haz is from Lebanon.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't matter because he doesn't even know about the like I called him once a Candace because he doesn't even know about which parties rule Lebanon and what each of the factions of the Lebanese but like he doesn't even know basic. Like I know more about Lebanon than he did.
Peter Dow used to try to say that he was not white, and then we were like, yeah, no, you're white.
He was also a phalangist and part of a Lebanese death squad.
Yeah. And then, so that was the one on the video, the girl that we were talking to was Lebanese. She didn't have a PFP. We couldn't see her picture, but we didn't go back to see her videos until after. But she's like, I'm not even white. And oh my God, she's as white as I am.
Okay. Oh, like I said, it doesn't matter if you think you're white or not. Are you able to represent, like, do you know enough about Lebanon? Like, are you able to have a competent conversation about the history, the conflicts, the culture of Lebanon? And Haz cannot, because I've had that conversation, and he didn't even know which parties like were on top.
Yeah.
So he may be from Lebanon, but he doesn't have enough contact or knowledge about his own culture.
Yeah.
And I mean, with Lebanese, it's not really fair to judge them on the like they couldn't help have the Crusaders rape their ancestors.
I mean, yeah. I lived with a girl from Lebanon when I was younger. We were roommates, and so she was, only here. This is the late 80s, early 90s, so she was here for just a few years, and she'd tell me some horrific stories of things going on over there, but she,
yeah, she. I mean, a lot of them,
there's herself white. She wasn't like
a lot of them. Like, if they didn't have their accent, and if they didn't have, like, if they weren't eating hummus every day, or like, most Americans wouldn't ask them, so where are you really from?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, if they had an accent and then their name was, I don't know, Abdullah, and then they had hummus for lunch, then they'd totally be like, where are you really from? Kind of conversations. But that wouldn't happen, or if they were eating a sandwich and didn't have an accent.
No, she had a French name, so.
Oh, okay. Was she a Maran? There's actually a French Lebanese faction who came from France when France colonized Lebanon. Marionette? No.
I'm not positive.
There is definitely French people who live in Lebanon.
Yeah.
Who came when France colonized Lebanon.
Yeah. I never met her father. Her mother.
Was she Muslim or Christian?
They weren't
religious.
They weren't religious. Yeah.
Okay.
So, I didn't really ask like what I'm assuming that they came from Christianity though, because like, just but just not practicing. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I don't think that
most people who are either Muslim or Christian are just. They are born into a religion, but they're not really that religious.
Yeah. No, you have Jewish people that do the same thing. They're just like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Those two, but it's just that's like the majority of the world, so it's not.
Yeah.
Like most people aren't just going and praying. Like they just don't. Like if I ask, they'll tell you what their family's religion is when they were born.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I really cared enough to really ask them, but when I was living with her and stuff. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Anyways, so we'll pre-record on Wednesday because I have to make the long trek over. I'll take. How about this time? If I go to a museum, like a Holocaust celebration museum.
Yeah, films. Yeah, see if you come across some interesting stuff, bring it back for us.
Okay, I'll bring you some pictures.
Okay.
With that, bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.